The beds in my own garden have not been dug for over 35 years, as I've always subscribed to the no-dig method. No-dig has now become all the rage, and I caught up with a man who's become synonymous with it. I'm here with Charles Dowding, and I'm at the first no-dig garden at an RHS flower show, which is fantastic. So when do you think the RHS started getting interested in you?
Well, I would date it to 2011. I gave a lecture at Kew, and Sheila Das came along, who turns out is now the edibles manager at Wisley.
Yes.
She's brought no-dig into Wisley big time since about 2016. I think the force of the grassroots movement through social media, they can't ignore what a lot of their members are doing. The sort of growing end of the show and the allotments up there, causing a huge amount of interest compared to the more traditional floral side of things. So I think the RHS have realised, they can benefit a lot of people by doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone wants to grow their own now. Charles, you've been doing no-dig for what, since late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, about 40 years, yeah.
About 40 years. And what made you start to do this?
I became a vegetarian at university actually, and then started to get interested in nutrition. My family were farming, chemical farming.
Yes.
And I was reading up about it and became aware of how many chemicals were being used, and then discovered the Soil Association and joined them in 1991.
Yeah. And
I got interested in that whole organic approach, and some of their older writings in the Soil Association did cover no-dig.
Yeah.
And that was things written in the 1940s, 50s, and that felt right to me. Respecting the life in the soil as well as the life above the soil, because very much the emphasis was always about what we could see in the nature that was visible.
Yeah.
And no one really at the time, and even in the Soil Association, ironically, because they are all about soil, they weren't really considering the effect of, say, rotivating the soil or whatever it might be, as long as it was organic. And the organic would become quite a narrow definition of not using chemicals.
Yeah, I think the thing is, we didn't know what was going on underneath the soil there, did we? So we weren't aware of all the microorganisms that sit in that 6mm top layer, did they? Now the soil scientists are going into them in depth. They're analysing which fungi, which bacteria, and all the breakdown of things. And so that's opened up. It's like a massive world underground, isn't it?
That has helped. But if you read back, like in the 1930s, there was Professor Rayner, Rayner, she worked for the Forestry Commission, and she was doing trials on Wareham Heath, growing conifers in different materials, and she was struggling to get the kind of growth she wanted. She added a little bit of homemade compost and found incredible increase in growth, then started to reason why was that going on and got interested in fungi. She did a lot of work discovering mycorrhizal fungi in the 1930s. There is nothing new under the sun. It has all been discovered before, but it got forgotten. It got massively forgotten. I think with the drive to produce food and World War II fertilizers, and then the chemical companies really moved in. Yeah. And even organic and everything like that took a massive backseat. It's
an interesting thing, this garden here, because obviously I've seen your garden, and at home, they don't look all ready to pick at the same time. There's always a cover on something, isn't it? You just cannot grow things that look like this without covers. But these have all been grown for you. Yeah, totally. And it's a show garden, and it's to show how wonderful vegetables look, and it's to promote no-dig, really. But is there anything that you think is really unreal about this garden? Or
I don't want to be critical about it, because it is a fantastic piece of work to demonstrate what you can do with vegetables and how beautiful they are.
Yeah. I particularly admired the water butt. I thought that was fantastic. Right. So you have water butts at home, or how do you water things?
Mine are old stylish containers, but this is John Wheatley, who was one of the builders here, and he found all this stuff lying around his nursery in Somerset. So they're a nice touch. Chains are like a dam pipe.
Dam pipe, yeah. We've used those before, and I like the sedums in the gutters. But surely they would get so wet, wouldn't they, with all the rain off the roof, that the sedum would not be the best plant there?
Well, you would think that, wouldn't you?
But they look good.
It shows.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of those plantings, they look great, but a little bit impractical for watering, maybe, that kind of thing.
What, the ones on the compost bins?
In growing in the pallet, planted in the pallet, pot stuffed in the pallet. Some of them are sideways even, so you can't really get the water in them.
But if you were doing no dig at home and you wanted it to look good, I mean, most of us, the veg garden is now right by the kitchen door, isn't it? It's not down beyond, and so it's inside, and so we want it to look good. So touches like that, if you weren't doing it economically, you would add those in.
Use every little bit of space is superb, and make it look beautiful, and have some flowers in amongst your vegetables. I really like marigolds and nasturtiums and those kinds of things. It's fantastic.
Yeah, because they just bring in more insects, don't they? And they increase the diversity. Because of your massive YouTube success, and which you started, what, 7 years ago?
Yeah.
You're way before me. Yes. And because it's grown so massive, is most of your garden for the produce for sale? Do you make your living from selling the vegetables now, or is it more about YouTube and talks and spreading the word?
Yeah, no, I make my living more from this educational work and YouTube, and written 10 books, and there's 3 more. So that's all a big job as well. But the garden's going strong, and it's a market garden. We're selling to Bruton around £20,000 worth of veg and salads every year.
Oh, that's pretty good. On what sort of acreage?
Quarter acre.
That is very good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very intensive.
Very intensive.
No dig, you can grow a huge amount in a small area because you've got it really fertile, easy to manage, no weeds.
So with how many people working on that? I was going to say,
I've now got a full-time guy. That's the irony of it, really. The vegetables don't pay for growing, if you like. I'm spending more on growing them, but they're subsidised by the rest of the work.
Yeah. But whenever I've done gardens for hotels and things like that, if you actually grow vegetables, not on a field scale, but with gardeners, it's no way can it work compared to buying them in, and they've got to wash them, pick them, and things like that. And harvesting takes most. I think that's the longest job of all is the harvesting.
Yeah. So when you get good at growing veg, you'll have a lot of picking.
Yes. One thing I really disagree with you on, though, and that is you don't like raised beds, do you? But as you get older, Charles, surely, do you reckon in 10 years' time you'll be having your beds on the flat? Or do you think you will actually capitulate and start raising them up so you don't have to bend so far? Because let's face it, it's hard work bending down, isn't it? And it's not that comfortable.
It's also a lot of work to make a raised bed.
Yeah, I agree, the materials, but that's one investment, and then that will see you through 10 years or something.
I found that even a raised bed, you've still got to lean over, haven't you? Have you ever found that?
But it's not such a weak position because you can bend from the waist. Or if you've still got knees. Bear in mind, the average age of the RHS member is 65, I think.
Okay.
And so you will have quite a few poorly knees.
Wooden sides can hold slugs between the rotting wood and...
You say that? I don't find that. No, I really don't find that. I don't think I have more slugs in my raised beds than you have here. Okay. But we will never be able to prove that, so I can say that convincingly. And
I appreciate you asking the question, because I don't like being dogmatic about anything, and I recognise there's many ways to garden.
Quite agree.
So it's great to do it your own way.
But if I came to you...
I'm always keen to point this out, just because a lot of people assume that you need the wooden sides.
Yeah. They do. They do. But if I came to you and I said, Charles, I'm a lovely benefactor and I'm going to make all your garden into raised beds and you won't cost you a penny, would you say yes or would you say no? Oh, he won't be moved. Okay.
The difference here, where you got flat, your plants in the beds can root more easily into the pathways. In this case, it's got a bit of wood chip on, but it's full of dynamically living soil.
Yeah.
It's not compacted soil. Just because you walk on it doesn't mean it's compact. It's firm, but it's not compact. So it
will be more compacted.
I use the word compact for damaged, and I think that's what it should be reserved for. If soil is compacted, that in agricultural terms, that means there's a damage there.
Yeah.
Excessive pressure when it's wet, basically.
But if you're running up and down there and you're on a heavy clay soil, you're gonna damage that soil, aren't you?
No, I've never seen that. And I've gardened in clay for long periods with no dig. That's the difference. You're not damaging the structure at all, so it's holding much firmer and open.
What we should do is get a penetrometer and just test
that would be
penetration and see if the penetrometer goes in easier without a path than with a path.
Have you used a one of those.
But where we put hardwood mulch under oak trees where they've had dieback disease, the penetrometer without the mulch, it won't go in.
Right.
You put a big mulch in and the penetrometer just goes sliding in really easily.
Yeah.
So it completely helps increase all the microorganisms.
Yeah, totally.
And it spreads the weight, and so that makes it much healthier.
Funnily enough, I met a guy at the weekend who's a tree surgeon, and he's been working with a guy who looks after the Queen's trees, some really old trees which have had compaction from people walking massively under these trees to look at them. And they've been trying air spades.
Yeah, we use it sometimes.
But not with success. And this guy's really into no-dig, so the guy was talking to him, he said, why not try a mulch of compost under these trees? And that was about 2 years ago. They've been having great success.
It's amazing.
So showing this principle of the organic matter on the surface, keeping the soil open underneath. That's my firm belief and observation of many years.
You see, what I would have thought is that when you've got a raised bed, my main quibble with them is, if any, is that water in soil moves sideways, doesn't it? So, and in a raised bed, the plant can't pull up soil from the other side of the raised bed, obviously, whereas here it can go into the pathways, as you say. Totally. So it's got a bigger draw on water. So I think you do need to water more in a raised bed. For sure.
I noticed at homemakers in a dry August, say, the vegetables on the sides of the beds are bigger than the ones in the middle because they're pulling
that water.
Yeah, moisture from storms.
They always say that when you get the difficulty with planting close together, isn't it? In a dry period, it's the fight for water that causes the stress.
Absolutely.
That's the only problem really with planting closely.
Generally, planting close together, I think is so good. For me, it's another form of companion planting. Because we tend to think only which plants like other plants. So plants also just like being close together. And that's where we do the multi-sowing as well. And putting in little seedlings.
And you do your multi-sowing, so with your onions, with your leeks. What else do you do?
Beetroot, radish, turnips.
Right.
Even things like for salads, kale. If you want small leaves, you can go 2 or 3 together. That kind of thing.
For nearly a decade, Charles has also kept some beds where he has dug the soil as a control measure to scientifically prove the benefits of no-dig.
You've obviously been at it a long time. What are the most groundbreaking things you recently discovered in the last couple of years, do you think?
Going back to what you were saying about scientists now looking at it, and I've worked with a microbiologist in Norway who I sent her samples of my no-dig beds for analysing under a microscope.
The results showed that when soil is dug, its particles become separated and unstable, resulting in soil erosion. Whereas in the no-dig bed, the particles cling together to form aggregates. Adding organic mulch to the surface improves soil structure further as it helps hold the minerals and carbon in the soil together, giving much better drainage, which is all good news for veg production and for the environment.
I'm working with another scientist now who's measuring carbon in the soil of these 2 beds.
Yes.
Dig and no-dig. And she's amazed. She says there's so much more carbon in the no-dig bed, even though both beds have had the same amount of compost every year for 9 years.
So it's retaining the carbon, it's locking it in somehow.
Exactly.
Because of the extra humus, do you think?
Well, I think it's basically, that probably put it the other way around. The dig bed, because of the cultivation, is losing carbon to oxidation.
Oh, right.
CO2.
So CO2. So that is a
That's a huge
thing at the moment.
This gets so many people interested.
Yeah.
This can bring a lot of people into gardening, I would say, because they can have a no-dig plot. They're helping the climate. It could be better.
Yeah. No, that is fascinating. It really is. So it's obviously a movement that's here to stay and is going to grow. Yeah. People, after seeing my YouTube video, they say even Charles Dowding digs his beds to start with, but it's wrong, isn't it? You don't ever do it to start with. You will start with no dig from the word go, and whatever awful your soil is, it will still work, whether it's sand, heavy clay, rocks or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I would consider using a fork would be what we were talking about before, truly compacted soil, of which there are very few examples. Mostly when people talk about compact soil, they do mean just that it's firm. And if it's growing lots of weeds, I always say that's great. So the weeds can grow. That shows you can do it. Just put cardboard on them and compost and off you go.
Lovely.